Hey, everyone on Zoom. We're just waiting on a few more families to show up. So if you'll just hang on, I'm going to mute you guys for a while and then we'll be back. And oh, there they are. We have 1, 2, 3 families. Okay, you can talk to them like they're in the room.
Okay, we'll wait just a couple more minutes, people on Zoom, see if we can get any more people coming in. So we'll get started in just a couple minutes.
Do you do the trauma informed?
I don't. So that is Katie Everhart. That's Katie. She is another OT here.
Okay.
Yeah.
I knew it was a K.
Is it, there's a lot of K, there's a lot of kids around here.
I noted.
Yeah, just holler out. Hey, K, someone will say, oh, me.
The interns are excited because they want to come watch.
Oh,
They're in OT school, so. Yeah, no kids. I said I'll give it a couple more minutes.
a couple more minutes and then,
Okay.
yeah, okay.
Do you want to hear?
I do, yeah. I'm an OT. I'm an OT here, yeah.
And she's already a therapist. So she heads up that clinic.
I do,
He's.
So glad to hear that. So glad to hear that.
I said 6:37.
Okay, let's go.
Text.
Oh, they're probably on two, aren't they?
Probably.
Text. Yeah. I'd say we're clear if you want to come up and join us.
Awesome, thank you.
Are you recording?
We are recording.
Okay, cool, okay. So we'll go ahead and get started. So my name is Kaylin Shiver. I'm an occupational therapist and our autism specialist here at Children's Theraplay. And so part of that autism specialist training that I underwent, I did some really extensive training through University of Southern California through their sensory integration certificate course. And so that's kind of an area that I specialize in now as an OT. So for this in-service, I'm going to be talking about sensory processing and integration. What even is that, right? What is it? What does that mean for our kiddos, and what can you do at home, right? Which is the big takeaway here. That's what we're really wanting. So we will go ahead and get started. Oh, you know, I paused my PowerPoint. There it is. Oh no, my PowerPoint froze.
No. I'll see if there's any chat going on right now. Make sure everybody's okay.
Oh my gosh, this is.
Her PowerPoint's frozen. She'll be back in just a
Frozen,
moment
this is catastrophic.
for those online.
Okay, there we go. Restart.
There now, it's on.
Oh my god. This is like a little bit taller than
They are. They're not made for the short people.
all the way.
My feet don't touch it.
Oh, wow, that's really, all right, hold on, I'm gonna unplug for a minute. And then I'll plug back in.
Oh, yeah. I heard she was gonna.
There we go, okay. Wow, that could have been just the worst thing that's ever happened to me.
I think these moms are on vacation. We're okay.
So where are we going? So we'll talk a little bit about some sensory systems overview. We will talk about types of sensory integration differences. What is sensory regulation and how the heck do I get there? We'll talk about strategies to achieve sensory reg, and there will be a practicum part. So for in-person people, we actually will get up and do stuff. We will move our bodies, which is great. For people on Zoom, I do have a list for you guys to be trying out as well. So I want you guys to do that. And then we'll wrap up with questions, discussion, all that good stuff. So before we begin, I want to talk about why does sensory matter, right? Why is this even important? So we, at our most baseline, we are sensory beings, right? That is the most foundational and most basic way that we experience the world around us is through our senses. So you can't exist as a human without being a sensory being. So it really is critical to development in general. Basic sensory integration theory states that sensory experiences have to be organized and interpreted in order to participate in daily occupation. So basically what this means is that you have to be able to interpret the sensations that you're experiencing in order to do things like play, do your self-care, go to school, do your chores, sleep well, access your education, and then participate socially with others around you. So you really can't get away from sensory. You can try, but it doesn't work. And then another little fun tidbit. So sensory integration contributes to skill development, and it's highly linked with both your emotion regulation and your ability to organize your behavior, right? So if a kiddo is having a hard time with some of these things, my perspective is I'm always going to go back and look at sensory, right? What's going on with our sensory systems and how can I work with that to help these other things? Thanks, Kara. So there are 8 sensory systems. There's not just the 5 that we learned in school. So the 5 we learned in school, those are our external senses, right? So smell, taste, auditory, your hearing, sight, and then touch. Those are those senses that we grew up learning about in school, right? They're your external senses. But there's actually 8. So we have 3 internal senses as well. So we have proprioception, we have vestibular, and we have interoception as well. And so I'm sure you guys have heard these terms kind of tossed around and stuff. These are our internal senses, and they really help us develop kind of that sense of our body. I'm gonna go ahead and click. Yeah. But for the purpose of this, we are going to talk about these 3 here at the bottom. So we're going to talk about tactile, proprioception, and vestibular because these are at the bottom of the pyramid because these sensations are really the most key and the most foundational senses, right? So if a kiddo is having a hard time with different sensory things, or we just notice that this is something that's going on, I'm always going to go back to these 3 at the bottom here, and I'm going to look at those sensations first and foremost. Not to say that the other ones are not important, because they absolutely are, but we can almost always tie back to these bottom 3 sensations, and we'll talk more about them in depth. I'm going to go ahead. So we'll start with the tactile system. So I'm not going to go into the nitty gritty neurobiology because I know that that's not really what you're looking for. Even though I nerd out on it, that doesn't mean everyone else does either. So we'll just do a brief overview of those 3 bottom senses. So the tactile system, your touch system. A fun fact about tactile is it's actually your earliest system in utero to develop, and it is the most mature at birth, and your tactile system is actually almost entirely matured by the time that you're born. So it is incredibly powerful. So your tactile system is one of the first ways that you experience the world around you, right? So just think about it, right? I'm resting my elbows on my tray. I'm experiencing the tray through my tactile senses. You guys are experiencing your chairs tactily, right? Like all these things, it's one of the key, most foundational ways that we experience the world around us. There are 2 neurological pathways, and I'm not going to go into them except to highlight that one pathway carries information about pressure and about proprioception, which we'll get to. And then another pathway carries information about pain, temperature, and light touch. So I don't want to go too far into it, but I think it is important to know some of the neurobiology because I want to empower you guys, right, to be able to think critically about these things as you go home with your kiddos and do things like that. And then the last thing about your tactile system, it highly influences your subconscious recognition of just all the sensory inputs, your arousal state, your emotional tone, and your body control through multiple areas of the brain. So when we're looking at the brain, the receptors from your tactile system, they're connected to like literally almost every area of your brain. So tactile can be really, really powerful, for good or for evil, right? But yeah, so that's our tactile system. Go ahead and go next. So proprioceptive system, if I had to pick a favorite sensory system, it'd be probe. So your proprioception, your proprioceptive system is the primary sensation that informs your brain about where your body is in space, right? Your proprioceptive receptors, they're located in your muscles, in your tendons, your ligaments, your joints, your fascia, right? They're all throughout your body. And those are the receptors that signal back to your brain, this is where my body is in space. This is where my arm is in space. This is where my legs are. I like to call the proprioceptive system an integrative system. It really is a buddy system. It doesn't like to hang out on its own. So when your proprioceptive system integrates with your tactile system, which we learned in tactile, right, that it is connected in a pathway. So it helps your body perceive where your body is in space and its position both in the world and then where things are inside of you, right? And then your proprioceptive system, it also integrates with your vestibular system. And this really facilitates things like your posture, your coordination, your stability, and your balance, right? The cool thing about proprioception is it's often used as a compensatory strategy for poor sensory processing elsewhere. So for example, say like I don't like loud noises, right? Not my jam. So like if a kid doesn't like loud noises, they put their hands over the A, it's blocking out the sound, but you're also getting proprioceptive input through your hands to your ears, right? So we automatically use proprioception to compensate when things aren't right elsewhere. It's the same thing like with a bear hug, right? If bear hugs feel really good to you, it's because you're getting all that nice juicy deep pressure all throughout your body. So we automatically use proprioception on our own anyways. So it can be another really powerful tool in our back pockets. We'll go next. Oh yeah, somatosensation. So I mentioned briefly that your tactile and your proprioceptive system kind of pair together, right? There's actually a fancy word for that. It's called somatosensation. If you want to click again, Kara. Yeah. Wow, that's hard. But so your tactile system and your proprioceptive system, they really work together. They work best when they're working together. And somatosensation is just that combo of probe and tactile input. The cool thing about somatosensation is that it's critical to the development of your safety awareness, connection with the social world, exploring your environment, developing your body schema, motor planning, motor learning, development of motor skills, refinement of motor movements. I hope there's like a pattern coming up here, and just your overall ability to regulate. So these two are massively powerful together. Okay, we'll go next. Okay, so our vestibular system. We could spend hours and hours talking about the vestibular system, but we won't. The vestibular system is massive, and I'm still learning things about the vestibular system. So your vestibular system determines your awareness of your head and body relative to gravity. So this is how is my body moving through space. So probe is where am I, vestibular is how am I moving. So your vestibular system, it's also linked with muscle tone, with posture, and your sense of equilibrium, right? How easily can you stay upright? Or like if you're on something that's tilting, can you find your way back to the middle? Vestibular is also really correlated with a stable visual field, as well as your physical and emotional security, right? So if you don't have a good relationship with gravity, right? It is not your friend. You don't like it when your feet are off the ground. That puts you, I mean, think about that, right? When you've been standing on the edge, it's terrifying, right? And for some of our kids whose vestibular systems are not, are hypersensitive, that's how they feel literally all the time. They feel on edge all the time. So your vestibular system can be really highly correlated with your emotional security. There's two types of vestibular systems. We'll focus mostly on the peripheral, which is actually located in your inner ear. So it's bilateral, one in each inner ear. And it okay, I won't go into that nitty gritty. That's not nearly as fun. But there are two types of receptors. So there's semicircular canals that detect movement in three-dimensional space. So like when you're going forward, when you're tilting to the side, going backwards. And then there's also your otolithic organs that detect linear movement, both up and down and what's the word I'm looking for? Back and forth, as well as just your static position in space. And so the combination of these two receptors tell your brain how your body is moving. We won't talk about the central vestibular system very much. All you need to know is that it's linked really highly with visual and proprioceptive systems. Okay. So that is a quick, fast and nasty overview of the three basic sensory systems. I mean, we could talk for literally hours about it, but we won't because I don't have that long. So we'll move on to kind of the next section. So we're going to talk about sensory integration differences. And my favorite way to describe this is through my cup theory. You might have heard my cup theory before. I'm going to say it again if you have, so bear with me. So in your brain, right? Thinking about in your brain, each sensory system is a cup, right? So you've got 8 different metaphorical cups in your brain for each of your sensory systems. And when your cup is filled up to the top is when everything is perfect, right? Things are firing, you are feeling good, you're feeling stable, you're feeling secure, like, well, life is good and this is what we want. Great. So now imagine that each of those sensory cups are different sizes. Right? So every individual sensory system, every individual sensory cup is a different size. You might have a really, really big cup. And so you need to put lots and lots and lots of input to get to that just right state, right? You might have really small, tiny cups. And so you pour some input in and then it starts overflowing. And when it overflows, now we're in meltdown city, which is no fun for anybody, right? So, and everybody's cups are different, right? No one person's cups are the same. Not even everyone's individual cups are the same. So for me in particular, I have a really small auditory cup. I cannot handle loud noises. I cannot handle a lot of different loud noises. I have a student right now, and when there's a lot going on, like she's caught me. I literally stare off into space and we're just like, and then I have to come back because it's too much for me to process. So I have a really small auditory cup. And when too much gets dumped in, I've been known to go into fetal position before when it's too much. A really common cup that you'll see with a lot of our kids is they've got these huge movement cups, right? Like their probe and their vestibular cups are huge. And we just keep dumping and dumping and dumping input in to try to get their cups filled up so that they can actually know where their body is in space and move. So think about your cups, think about your kids' cups, and that is a really powerful tool to just kind of know how your kid is experiencing the sensory world around them. Okay, we'll go to the next one. So there are 2 types of sensory integration differences. So there is processing differences. So processing is how you manage sensory information at multiple levels in the nervous system. So this is a common example of this. So like when you're running, say you're running water for a bath, right? Like my 5-year-old has literally done this to me before. I'm running water for the bath and it's perfect bathwater temperature, right? It's like not too hot, not too cold. It's really nice. And she sticks her finger and she goes, "Oh, it's too hot." And I'm like, "What do you mean? It's perfect." She's having a hard time processing that sensory information, right? That signal is not getting sent clearly to her brain. This is a really good example of this is also, so like say, a lot of times I'll have kids, do tactile exploration, right? And we're like playing with the kinetic sand or we're playing with shaving cream, whatever, like, "Oh, that's spiky." And I'm like, spiky, that information is not getting sent clearly up to their brain. So that's an example of processing differences. Modulation differences. So the ability to modulate is the ability to change to sensory information as it's coming at you and filter out what you don't need. So a really great example for this is like when you're putting your shirt on in the morning and they're like, "Okay, there's the tag on the back of my shirt." Like, "Oh, it's tickly, but it's fine," right? You move on with your day. You don't think about it all the time, right? That is typical modulation versus a lot of our kids, they feel that tag on their skin and they're like, oh my God, I can't stop thinking about it. All I feel is that tag and it's like sandpaper on my skin and I just can't stop thinking about it. That's a modulation issue, right? They can't filter out that unnecessary information. So you can be hyperreactive, which is the example of the tag on your shirt. So you have a really small cup. That's an example of a small tactile cup, right? Or you can be hyporeactive and so an example of hyporeactive. So like these are the kids who, when they're eating and they've got like food all over their face and you're like, did any food get into your mouth? And they're like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Like, you have no idea that there's food all over your face, right? That's an example. So they have a huge tactile cup and we need to dump lots of input in so they can even recognize that there's food on their face. There's also sensory craving, which we won't talk about a whole lot here because sensory craving can be really tricky to manage. The one big thing that I will tell you about sensory craving is that it oftentimes looks like a kid is hyporeactive, right? And like they need a lot of input, right? The difference is, so if a kid is hyporeactive, once they reach that threshold, you'll see the change spark, right? For a kid who is sensory craving, that change will never come. They will just keep going and going and going and going and going, and it actually dysregulates the kid. So a common example that I've seen in the clinic is on trampolines, right? Trampolines can be very regulating. They can be a great tool, but I have had kids who jump and jump and jump and jump and jump, and then they get dysregulated. And I'm like, oh my God, this is no good anymore. Right now I've got to totally shift gears. So it can be tricky to manage sensory craving, but it is out there. Okay, we'll go to the next one. Okay, so what is sensory regulation, right? We know what our sensory systems are. We know how we can process and modulate. What is sensory regulation? And I bring this up because regulation is like a super hot button topic now, right? Like everybody is talking about regulation, which is awesome. But there's different kinds of regulation, right? So there's like your emotional regulation, right? But then there's also just strictly sensory regulation. And so sensory reg is the ability to manage your emotion, your arousal, your body, and just your overall state of being within the sensory world around you, right? It's your ability to manage the sensory inputs coming at you, process them, and then output back into the world around you. So the big key with sensory reg, so you're trying to optimize functional engagement in the world in order to do what you need to do, right? And I say functional engagement because what is functional for me is not functional for anybody else, right? Like it's very individualized what's functional for each individual person. And the other thing I want to bring up with sensory reg, so kids are not born inherently knowing how to do this, right? Like it is not something that you pop out and you're like, I'm a sensory being, I've got this under control, right? You have to learn this just like you have to learn everything else in life. And so we need to give them those experiences, right? In order to be able to learn. So we'll go to the next slide, Kara. So this is an oldie. This graph is actually from 1991, the year I was born. There we go.
Now I'm old.
But this is one of my favorite graphs to really highlight sensory. So we're going to talk about this optimal state of arousal. And so Zoom people, this is that gray band on the slide. So when you're in your optimal state of arousal, this is when your cups are filled up just right? Like this is when everything is going really great. You're experiencing the sensory world around you and you are outputting back and life is great. And so you can see, so this is time, right? Wake up, go to bed. So this blue line, right? So they wake up and you kind of fluctuate up and down, right? You're going throughout your day, you have different experiences, you get a little bit more aroused and then you come back down and then you go up and then you come back down. But you're always within this gray zone. You're always functioning the best that you can, right? There's nothing concerning going on with this, right? This is what we want to happen. This is where we strive to be. So a really common profile that we see a lot of times with our kids with sensory issues is we see this green profile, right? So we wake up in the morning and we're in that optimal state, right? We're feeling good. Life is really great. And we go through our day. We have ups and downs. We have ups and downs. And then, we're starting to creep up we're creeping up. So we've got too much information coming at us and nothing that's bringing us down. So maybe we're getting more agitated. Maybe we're getting a little bit more excitable, right? And we just keep amping up. This happens a lot for kids who hold it all together all day at school, and then they come home and it all just comes out and you're like, oh my gosh, what happened? They've been holding it all together right along this line right here, and then they get home and one thing happens and they just tip over, right? And now they're way over aroused. Things are out of control. It's not fun for anybody. Another common profile that I see is this red line, right? So these are kids who are under aroused. So these are kids who they wake up and it's not like they ever really actually woke up. Like they're still sleepy, they're sedentary. It takes a lot to get them going. Maybe you have to repeat their name like 3 or 4 times to catch their attention. So these are kids who are low arousal, right? And they go through their day, they experience things, but they never actually get up into that optimal range of arousal, right? So these kids have really, really big cups and we just can't get enough into their systems. And then this last profile, this yellow profile, this one sucks. I'm just gonna put it out there. Like it's not fun to experience this. So you wake up and you are on edge and you just stay there all day. Like that sucks. It's not fun. And you don't get any reprieve from it, right? You're just feeling on edge from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep. So I bring up this graph because it's a really good visual representation of how we experience sensory throughout our day and what this might look like, right? So as adults, we can manage to keep ourselves in this blue zone, right? Like, and we have tools and tips and tricks that we use subconsciously, right, to keep ourselves in this blue zone. But most of our kids, especially our kids who operate in the green or the yellow or the red, they don't have those tools to get them up here, right? So that's where we can come in, provide them with those sensory experiences to help them get up into this blue area. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. So practical strategies, right? Like this is what we're actually wanting. I wish I could tell you if you do A, B, C, you're done. That's all you need to do, right? I wish I could tell you that. But sensory is just a lot more complex than A, B, C, check, you're done. So I can't tell you exactly what to do, but my hope is that I can empower you guys and give you the information so that you can think critically about this and you can, start your own sensory journey, right? And really start to understand your kiddo. So the best thing that you can do is to provide multiple opportunities for sensory input throughout the day. And we will actually go through some different sensory experiences to get some ideas percolating in your brains. And it doesn't have to be these crazy elaborate Pinterest ideas. Like that's not it. No one can do that in real life, I don't think. But so your best bet is going to be providing multiple opportunities for sensory input throughout the day. And when I say that, I really want to focus on the big 3: proprioception, vestibular, and tactile. And that's what we're going to focus on in the practicum. That gives you the most bang for your buck, right? Since those are our 3 most foundational sensory systems, by working on these 3 specifically, it gives you the most back at you. The one thing that I do want, and I wish I could, like I said, I wish I could do ABC and then you're done. But that's not the way it goes. It really is a trial and error experience. So when you're trialing and you're erring and you're trying all these different things, I do want to let you guys know to watch for signs of dysregulation, right? Because that's going to be a really powerful tool for you as you start learning your kids' sensory systems. And so you wanna watch for these signs of dysregulation so that this is when their cup is overflowing, right? So this looks like having a flushed face. This looks like increased and inappropriate excitement. So like a lot of times this can look like when a kid pushes someone over and then they're laughing about it. Maybe it's not a behavior, maybe it is a sensory thing, right? And their cup is overflowing and they're just doing their best that they can with what they've got. Increased fidgeting or movement, aggression can also look like a sign of dysregulation. And this is going to be so individual for every single kid, right? Some kids you're going to say, okay, their cheeks are getting flushed too much, right? Versus other kids, you're going to be like, wow, they're like really fidgeting or they're really relying on their fidget spinners a lot right now. Like they're probably getting a little dysregulated. So we'll go to the next slide, Kara. And so what that really highlights is the power of observation. Yeah, so you are the expert in your child. I might be the expert in sensory, right? I might be the expert in pediatric occupational therapy, but I will never be the expert like you are on your child, right? And that should be really empowering. Like I can give you all this great information, but then you can take that information and apply it to your kid in ways that I never could. And so I want to highlight the fact that literally just watching your kid and just observing how they interact with the world around them is going to be the best way to learn about their sensory systems, right? A lot of times, if you can, because I know that the real world can be tricky, but keeping a log, right? So like, especially when you notice those signs of dysreg, just keeping a log like this happened, and then this happened, and then this was their response. And the more that you get that log going, the easier it is to start picking up those signs and those symptoms, right? And to start really learning about your kid's sensory system. Okay, it's practicum time. Yay! So people on Zoom, a lot of these things are things that you can do at home, because that's the point, right? It doesn't have to be these elaborate Pinterest-worthy creations. Some of them, I mean, unless you've got like some shaving cream and stuff. But anyway, so everyone should be able to do these. Zoom people, try your best to do these at home if you can. People in person. So what we're gonna do, I've got different sensory experiences for pro-assistive and tactile. And so it's free form, right? No, we don't have to like sit and talk about it or whatever. But take note of how you're feeling when you are through each experience. What sensations are you feeling? And then your emotional and your behavioral response, right? Because that emotional behavioral response is what you're gonna be tuned into with your kid, right? Okay, so we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so I'll go ahead and pull out the stuff out here. So for our tactile systems, we're gonna play with shaving cream. We're going to play, I've got a couple sensory bins. We're gonna play with Play-Doh, and then I actually have a massager. It came from the barn. They let me borrow the horse massager. As long as I bring it back to them. For proprioception. So we're gonna do some wall push-ups. We're gonna do yoga. You can do any of these poses you want. And then you can do some jumping or some squatting, right? These are all examples of pro. And then for vestibular, you can spin. I will say gently spin because spinning is very, very powerful. Yeah, exactly, right? Like, no, thank you. So spin slow, don't go crazy. You won't feel good. So down dog yoga pose is also a vestibular experience, right? Because you're tilting your head upside down. Jumping is another vestibular experience, right? Because you're going up and down against gravity. And then obviously it's dark outside, but it has been nice weather. So I encourage you all the next time you're outside or you're at TheraPlay, because we do have a swing set over there, to just go swing on the swing and see what it actually feels like. Okay, let's go ahead. We'll take like 5-10 minutes to do all these different things. Okay, so I'm gonna get the stuff set up for in person. Zoom people, go for it. Okay. Should I just put in the chat things? I know, right? I know, you're like, I will take that massager. Like, I will start with that. Not gonna lie, when I we saw that. When I borrowed it from the barn, like I may or may not have given myself a little massage as well, right? Okay, so massager here, paper towels. So I have a chair that we can spin in gently, of course. And if you're feeling really frisky, I brought our astronaut board out that you can sit and it spins as well. So
He loves the chair.
right? Right? Okay. So go ahead and get there. Get up. Come play. Come play. Come play. You guys too,
Okay.
come play. Come play.
How come you never use the word stimming?
So stimming is a little bit different. So stimming, it's not like a tough word or anything. So stimming is more of It's just like a movement pattern, right? It's just a movement pattern. It can be sensory based. It doesn't always have to be sensory based. But I look at stimming, it really is a signpost to how kids are managing their environment, right? So if the kid is stimming a lot, that's telling me this is, you're really feeling a little unsure, or you're feeling like overwhelmed in this environment. How can I adjust that for you?
I don't like stimming or no? It feels sticky.
I don't think, I wouldn't, that wouldn't be my first go-to. If a kid is swinging, that wouldn't be my first go-to, that is this, that is the stim. But again, that would take, I would need to, do a little bit more, observation. things like that.
Yeah, I think my
And
kind is visuals.
A little bit of
Everything is
Yeah.
very much, he has to, he's always doing something, it was just like.
Yeah.
walking noodles and it's-
And
like it.
you have to put something. Yeah. Right, it's something with all. Yeah,
But yeah.
Yeah, and so I wash my hands. Yeah. What do you But yeah, so like things like that, right? And like I said, like it really is a signpost, right? So like, a lot of times I'll use them like kind of for how are we able to interact with our environment, right? Like, I mean, I spin too, like I do little fidget spins, and that's when my husband's like, okay, you're like feeling really nervous right now, and I'm like, that's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's calming.
Yeah.
Yes, it's calming.
If I give him something like with the grocery store.
Yeah. If I just say, yeah.
Giving out of all of these.
Probably be
that.
You can get through. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, but the plate.
I'm so confused about all of this, like,
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
I gotta go. I'm so.
Are you gonna sit on that and spin?
All of this.
It's probably gonna bring it.
Yes. So it's really individualized, right?
Like, so then I was watching.
Yeah.
because I was like,
Yeah.
it was a lot of good words. Like, and I want to understand like the most important
Yeah.
ones.
Yeah.
But so now I'm so confused about.
I did so.
So it is that it's sensory.
Joanna,
yeah,
we know what to rock. Orchestra rock camp, and
Uh-huh.
it's a sensory processing. It's all about proprioception, vestibular. She's been, yeah, she's just, I don't know, but she brought this in. I think she's.
So the best thing, so the number one takeaway is that I want you to take multis.
I was like, no way, I would be lost.
Oh, yes, let's go. Yeah, what kind of things?
No, my son likes to, he likes the swing that spins in circles.
Right, what kinds of things?
The,
make
whatever swing you call it.
right? And those, that alone will help you to be the. Yeah.
So.
But yeah, he would probably.
So he is a
Because I mean,
small
he likes to go out.
He's a small
Then what do you do?
He'll
So
swing it. Or he'll
headphones
spin
are
the
really good
chairs.
strategies.
Have you girls been on it?
And then we haven't used that. I don't know. That.
No. Swing as I've gotten older, I can't, then I can't.
Are an easy things to do. Right, so now the haircuts, right?
Used to do.
I have some actual like.
I feel
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I just feel like it feels like a marshmallow, but like just.
We did.
Non-fit.
She's like, yeah, I love that.
Yeah. Like, I don't know how to describe it, but I need him to make it.
It's an astronaut board. It's an astronaut board. That's the Google.
Here we go. Okay, I'll write it.
Okay, so you have that popular time. You're like. I feel like I can feel yeah. He looks.
Oh, so we, you know, he gets.
Oh, yeah, I would do that also. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
If I would have been busy, I would.
Big,
have been-
yeah.
You need roller coasters?
Yeah, I feel like that's my favorite.
Yeah.
Like tires. Now you. Yes. Have we done any probe things yet? Have we done, we've done yoga, we've done, what else we got? Jumping and squatting, do some squats.
I know what that is. I know what that feels.
It's funny though, so my daughter, she's funny. But so when she starts amping up and revving up and she starts going up, we actually, and it's always at bedtime, right? Like it's always bedtime. But we've observed, we've tried different things and we actually have her do like 10 squats before bedtime. So she's there going, and it works, so we get like relatively okay.
You know, 3 hours. Not last night, the night, 3 hours.
Oh.
Rocking like it's.
Oh,
And when he's amped and ramped before he goes to
Yes.
bed and running around his room,
Yes.
like wild child, I'm like, I know we're not sleeping tonight.
right?
This is not happening. Not
They
happening.
don't like sensory bends.
Then, so that's another observation, right? Then you're like, okay, that's not a tool that will help calm my child, right? So as an OT, what that tells me, if they don't like sensory bands, that tells me that their tactile cup is probably really small, and so we need more of that, that heavy proprioceptive work. So I would go towards like Play-Doh, I would go towards putty, I would go towards things like that. Would be my first go-to.
Well, that would be tactile, right?
It would, but it's a different type of tactile sensation. It's a heavier tactile sensation. That's super nitty gritty. That's like super neurobiology anatomy. That's, yeah. So that would be my recommendation. Yeah. I love it. Okay, so Zoom people, we're coming back. We just a couple more. We'll go ahead and switch to the next slide, Kara. So types of input to influence regulation, right? First off, think about how you're feeling right now, right? Like, I hope you're feeling a little more alert, a little more engaged, right? This is great. This is exciting. So like I said, this is so individualized, right? But in general, these are the types of things that you can do to decrease arousal when your kiddo is way up high. These are things you can generally try to calm. And if your kid is really low, these are the things that you can generally try to bring them back up. So to decrease, rhythmic linear vestibular input. That's a really fancy way to say rocking back and forth. Rocking chairs, right? Which, think about it, right? How do we soothe our babies, right? We soothe them by rocking back and forth. Rocking is really powerful. Deep touch pressure input, that's a fancy way of saying bear hugs, or arm squeezies, right? I do arm squeezies a lot with my kiddos. Joint compressions, anything weight bearing. So anything where their feet are on the floor, their hands are on the floor, and we are putting pressure through our hands and feet is going to help. And then another thing you can always do is dim the light, dim the sound, right? If a kiddo is really amped up, a lot of times I'm going to turn the lights down in whatever room we're in, and maybe I'll play like some classical music or something that's very calming, right? So if you need to increase arousal, things that will wake you up, irregular vestibular movement. That's the fancy way of saying spinning around. Or just like, I mean, spinning is one way to do it, but even just anything that's not rhythmic, right? So like when you're rocking, it's very rhythmic. You can put a metronome to it, right? But dysrhythmic is going to wake you up because your inner ear is literally ping-ponging around. Light, minimally resistive touch. So these are sensory bends. They're light, minimally resistive touch. Those are going to be things that wake you up. And then inversion, right? So going upside down is always a really good way to wake a kid up if they need to. Okay, we'll go to the next slide. Okay, so at the actual activities that are associated with those things. So rocking, back and forth swinging, jumping on a trampoline can be very, very calming and organizing for a lot of kids, especially if it's rhythmic, right? Bear hugs, compression, weighted blankets, doing arm squeezies, animal walks, Play-Doh, wheelbarrow walks, literally even just doing tummy time is a regulatory strategy, because think about it, when you're on your tummy, you're getting pressure points through your elbows, through your tummy, through your hips, through your knees. So that can be very regulating. And then as always, I mean, dimming visual and auditory input, it is what it is, right? Increasing arousal, things that you can do, swinging in circles, jumping on a trampoline can be alerting too, right? So that's where you really have to kind of know your kid and just observe and see what happens. When you jump on a trampoline, do they calm down or do they amp up? And that's how you know what it is for your kid. Climbing can increase arousal. Log rolling, so literally rolling like a log, like all throughout the living room or whatever. Going up and down incline. So a lot of times what I do in the clinic with my kids is I have us walking up and down various surfaces all day long, right? Because I'm trying to increase arousal states. Slime in the bathtub, because let's be honest, nobody wants slime in the carpet. Shaving cream again in the bathtub. Gentle tickling can be very alerting, right? If like my daughter has a really hard time waking up in the morning, and so just like some gentle tickles help wake her up in the morning. Sensory bends can increase arousal, right? And then, but again, inversion can increase your arousal too. So that's one of those things where you really have to just observe your kid, right? If you're doing some yoga together and you do a down dog and you're like, whoa, they ramped up. That was a lot to handle. Now you know that that's an increasing activity versus a decreasing activity. Okay. And like I said, so these are all really basic general strategies. These are really good starting points, right? So as you're going and you're going home and you're observing your kid and you're thinking about all this, these are really good starting points, right? And then as you observe, as you learn all these things, you'll kind of, you know, dive off into different branches and you'll see what really works for your kid. Okay. Any questions, Zoom or in person? On time. So good.
Anybody on Zoom, you're welcome to ask any questions you have.
I mean, we work really hard on.
Yes.
He asks for headphones a lot.
Yes.
And we listen to Katie recommended that bagel, whatever.
Yes.
And so, and they would do that at his ADA center 4 times a day. They put him in the dark. We have this, you know, music going and he gets just sensory breaks. But I mean, we just don't want people when things are people in the out here. And you know, and so a lot of it, I mean, he's overseeing the door opens and
It's too much.
So yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I will say, so sound it's hard. It's hard. It's one of the hardest sensory systems that I found to really, you know, change a whole lot. So as much heavy work as you can squeeze in his little body, right? So lots of compression, lots of arm squeezies, lots of, even so like we talked about like the tactile stuff, like anything like heavy weighted that he can play with, right? I think that would be a really nice strategy, because you're giving him that probe in his hands, but it also has that really calming effect, right? That stimming calming effect for him. Yeah, I would say just load him up on probe all day, every day. Yeah, that would be my biggest recommendation for you. Yeah. It's hard. It's a hard
program.
Yeah. I'd love to hear more about that program though, when you've completed it.
Well, I haven't found anybody that has it.
So. Oh, okay.
They were
Okay.
to find somebody, if
Yeah.
they could find somebody to be
Okay.
trained here, but
Okay.
I don't know if that would ever happen.
Okay.
Yeah. I can't find anybody that has it.
Okay. Well, keep me posted if you do. Any other questions?
I have one.
Ah.
This is it's not a potty training question, but so we have a 4-year-old and she, she was sitting on the potty, like fine, not scared of it at all. And I really think this is sensory, so this is why I'm asking it.
Yeah.
Not scared of like sitting on it at all. We did that for a long time. We'd read our books, totally fine, just sit there. She never, she didn't do anything. Still in diapers. We're like, it's fine to pee in your diaper. I think she's gotten to a point where she's like, I don't want to like sit around in my wet diapers anymore because she'll be 5 in June, so we're at that age. And on Friday, I sat her on the potty and she peed twice, and we were like, yay, like and she was like crying when the pee came out, and I'm like, no, it's good, like, that's what we want you to do. And we celebrated, we gave her a prize. Well, then come Saturday when we try to get her back to just sit on the potty again, again, no expectations, really, just let's sit on the potty again. We are like screaming, arching our back, throwing a tantrum, like she won't even sit on the potty at this point.
Oh,
And I feel like, I know this is a hard question, but I'm like, I'll take any help right now.
yeah.
But I feel like it's like a sensory thing for her,
Yeah.
where like the pee came out into the potty,
Yeah.
and she's very like scared of it now. And I do think there's some sensory like kind of tied to that. So
So,
yeah.
so was that the first time that she had peed without her diaper on?
Except for like a year ago, like we put her on the potty and she like started to pee, and like the look on her face was like complete terror, and then she sucked it back up, and that was that. And then we backed off like completely at that point. So yes, except for that time a year ago.
Okay, so my first thought, so this is gonna be a little gross, I'm sorry.
I don't care, but I'm just, well, because our problem right now is she's holding. Like we literally had to just put her in her bed like 20 minutes ago because she's holding for 6 hours at a time, and the only time she'll let go and actually pee in her diaper is if she's in her bed right now.
Okay, so super absorbent, right? Like there's no difference between diapers and clothes. They're all super absorbent, right?
Right.
Think about a full diaper, what that feels like, right? It's warm. There's a lot of compression, right? It's a lot of that proprioceptive input, right? So
Yes.
it's a very comforting feeling. And now think about sitting on the toilet. It's cold. The seat is cold. There's cold air down there. And so it can feel very uncomfortable. So my recommendation would be like a warm lap pad when she sits on the potty without her diaper on, like a warm rice bag or something like that, to help kind of that comforting sensation and make her feel a little bit better about it.
Okay. Any thoughts on like trying to get her back to the potty, because we're so fearful of it now?
Yeah, right. Honestly, I would probably go back to even just playing near the potty, right? Just playing in the bathroom, playing with stuff on the potty in her diaper, and just kind of start back at square one, making it a safe space for her again, would be my, and it'll
trying to get her just even like clothes on, diaper on, just we're just gonna like sit on the potty and just like play or read a book.
Read a book, do silly things. Yeah, that would be what I would suggest.
Okay. I love your idea of the warm, like kind of lap pad or race pad or something like that. That's a good idea if we can, because she would like kind of pull for my arm too, like kind of like, and I think part of it was scared, but I was like, well, maybe she wants that pressure too. So that makes sense from like from what you're saying, kind of a sensory standpoint.
Yeah. Cool.
Thank you.
Of course. Any other questions? Okay, cool. Well, thank you for coming in person. Appreciate you guys. Thank you guys for coming via Zoom. Also appreciate you guys. If you have any questions that you think of later, oh, that's okay. That's fine.